One of our top 10 events is the Congress of Vienna. The Congress of Vienna was an assembly in 1814 through 1815 that reorganized Europe after the Napoleonic Wars. It began in September 1814, 5 months after Napoleon's first abdication, and completed its final act in June 1814, shortly before the Waterloo Campaign and the final defeat of Napoleon. The settlement was the most comprehensive treaty that Europe had ever seen. And this Congress was also significant because it was the first time that the loser of the war, which was France, was invited to the Congress. The next event we chose was the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. On August 6, 1945, during World War II, an American B-29 bomber dropped the world's first deployed atomic bomb over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. The explosion immediately killed an estimated of 80,000 people. Tens of thousands more would later die of radiation exposure. 3 days later, a second B-29 dropped another A-bomb on Nagasaki, killing an estimated of 40,000 people. Japan's Emperor Hirohito announced his country's unconditional surrender. In World War II, in a radio address on August 15, citing the devastating power of a new and most cruel bomb. The next event we chose was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This event was significant because it was one of the main causes of World War I. Because Austria-Hungary was convinced that the Serbian government had assisted in Princip's group, and this made them issue a series of harsh demands, most of which the Serbs accepted. Austria-Hungary nevertheless declared war on Serbia on the 28th of July, setting off a chain reaction of military mobilizations prompted by Europe's system of alliances. The next event we chose was the Holocaust. The Holocaust was the state-sponsored persecution and mass murder of millions of European Jews, Romani people, the intellectual, disabled, political descendants, and homosexuals by the German Nazi regime between 1933 and 1945. After years of Nazi rule in Germany, dictator Adolf Hitler's final solution, now known as the Holocaust, came to fruition during World War II, with mass killings centers in concentration camps. About 6 million Jews and some 5 million others targeted for racial, political, ideological, and behavior reasons died in the Holocaust. More than 1 million of those who perished were children. Our next top 10 most important events on European history in the second semester is the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution was a period of scientific and technological development in the 18th century that transformed largely rural agrarian societies, especially in Europe and North America, into industrialized urban ones. Goods that had once been hardly crafted by hand started to be produced in mass quantities by machines in factories. Thanks to the introduction of new machines and techniques in textiles, iron making, and other industries. Our next event is the Berlin Conference of 1884 through 1885. The Berlin Conference marked the climax of the European competition for territory in Africa, a process commonly known as the Scramble for Africa. During the 1870s and early 1880s, European nations such as Great Britain, France, and Germany began looking to Africa for natural resources, for their growing industrial sectors, as well as a potential market for the goods these factories produce. As a result, these governments sought to safeguard their commercial interests in Africa and began sending scouts to the continent to secure treaties from indigenous peoples or their supposed representatives. The one we chose was the Dreyfus Affair. In 1894, after a French spy at the German embassy in Paris discovered a ripped-up letter in a wastebasket with handwriting said to resemble that of Dreyfus, he was court-martialed, found guilty of treason, and sentenced to life behind bars on Devil's Island, off of French Guiana. In a public ceremony in Paris following his conviction, Dreyfus had the insignia torn from his uniform and his sword broken and was paraded before a crowd that shouted, "Death to Judas, death to the Jew." But later, he was found innocent. Our next important event is the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was one of the most explosive political events of the 20th century. The violent revolution marked the end of the Romanov dynasty and centuries of Russian imperial rule. Economic hardships, food shortages, and government corruption all contributed to disillusionment with Tsar Nicholas II. During the Russian Revolution, the Bolsheviks, led by leftist revolutionary Vladimir Lenin, seized power and destroyed the traditional of Tsarist rule. The Bolsheviks would later become the Communist Party of the Soviet Union.
The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk had a role in provoking the civil war between the whites and the reds. They, so it left the socialist revolutionaries withdrawing from the government and left it entirely to the hands of the Bolsheviks. And some of them took the white side in the Civil War. Meanwhile, the Allied powers intervened.
The next event we chose was the Balkan Wars. The Balkan Wars were two successive military conflicts that deprived the Ottoman Empire of all its remaining territory in Europe except part of Thrace and the city of Adrianople. The second conflict erupted when the Balkan allies Serbia, Greece, and Bulgaria quarreled over the partitioning of their conquest. The result was a resumption of hostile in 1913 between Bulgaria on the one hand and Serbia and Greece, which were joined by Romania on the other. The next event we chose was the 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War was a 17th century religious conflict fought primarily in Central Europe. It remains one of the longest and most brutal wars in human history, with more than 8 million casualties resulting from military battles as well as from the famine and disease caused by the conflict. The war lasted from 1818 to 1848, starting as a battle among the Catholic and Protestant states that formed the Holy Roman Empire. However, as the 30 Years' War evolved, it became less about religion and more about which group would ultimately govern Europe. In the end, the conflict changed the geopolitical face of Europe and the role of religion and nation states in society.